Welcome to the 700 Club. More economic pain from COVID-19. Today, the government reported nearly 3 million more Americans have filed jobless claims, and that's now 36 million Americans have applied for unemployment.
More and more Americans are defying shutdown mandates. In one state, the courts have struck down a governor's lockdown orders. Jenna Browder has the story from Washington.
Americans are feeling the pinch and pushing back against lockdown measures. In Wisconsin, the state Supreme Court struck down the governor's stay-at-home order, ruling he overstepped his authority.
We need it badly, just so that we can get at least people back up and running.
And around the country, a growing number of people and local officials say they won't follow shutdown mandates, like in Madison County, Illinois.
It's been worse than when you own a business to work a lot more hours and make a lot less money or no money at all.
Officials there voting to reopen Wednesday, despite the governor's stay-at-home order. And President Trump visiting Pennsylvania today, another state where many people are upset with the governor's shutdown rules. All of this coming as economic pain mounts. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell warning Wednesday of a possible extended recession.
The path ahead is both highly uncertain and subject to significant downside risks.
Powell making clear his concern a recession may last long enough to cause extensive damage to the economy, making a recovery weaker and slower.
A prolonged recession and weak recovery could also discourage business investment and expansion, further limiting the resurgence of jobs.
His comments led to a sharp sell-off in stocks.
I think there's a lot of concern that a lot of people won't necessarily go back to their old jobs.
At the same time, even as millions of Americans are out of work, many face another problem. Sharply rising prices at the grocery store, the biggest in decades, with fewer people eating out, leading to a bigger jump in buying at the store at a time when many can't afford it.
If something's gone up $1, I'll either find an alternative or honestly not purchase it.
As states reopen, there's concern about another possible wave of coronavirus cases. At the same time, though, Americans are worried about the economy and their personal pocketbooks. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
I think we should all be worried about the economy. Yes, we need to be worried about COVID-19. We need to be worried about encouraging future outbreaks, that kind of thing. We need to find testing equipment to be able to test and then trace in order to control this. But the economic damage is going to be monumental, and we're just in the beginning of this. 36 million Americans unemployed. Start multiplying that out, how many rent payments aren't going to be made? How many mortgage payments aren't going to be made? How many business defaults are we going to start seeing? This is going to roll through the economy, not for weeks. This is months, if not years. Keep in mind, how long did it take us to actually recover from 2008? Well, it took more than 8 years. So are we in that kind of economic recovery? Can we even use the word recovery because we haven't hit bottom from what we're currently going through? In other news, a surprising development in Mike Flynn's ongoing legal battle. Judge Sullivan says he may hold him for criminal contempt. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington.
That is right, Gordon. The presiding judge in Flynn's case has appointed a retired federal judge to give arguments opposing the Justice Department's controversial decision to drop its prosecution of Flynn. Judge Emmett Sullivan is also asking retired Judge John Gleeson to consider whether Flynn should be held in criminal contempt for perjury. Flynn was never charged with perjury in the original case against him. Sullivan's move is seen as another signal that he's resisting quickly accepting the Justice Department's move to drop its case against Flynn. Sullivan had already created controversy by saying he would accept third-party arguments. Well, tensions between the United States and China have been growing in recent weeks, fueled by the COVID-19 outbreak and accusations of dishonesty. One result, some Americans suing Beijing, seeking to hold it accountable for the worldwide pandemic. But as CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips reports, those efforts could backfire.
New research shows a whopping 62% of Americans believe China is a growing problem. At the center of it, belief the regime allowed COVID-19 to infect the world. One expert tells me China is not likely to face any consequences because of this and could potentially benefit from it. COVID-19 has crisscrossed the globe, bringing unprecedented sickness, death, and financial crisis. With Wuhan, China seen as ground zero, major questions remain about whether the devastation could have been avoided.
Once it became clear to the Chinese Communist Party leaders that this virus was highly contagious and deadly and was being transmitted from humans to humans, they continued to encourage travel outside of China to the rest of the world.
And U.S. officials say China hasn't helped matters by choosing to withhold key information and spreading misinformation.
I think China will largely get away with this, unfortunately.
Dr. Glenn Doerr teaches international studies at Cedarville University.
Maybe it was foreign travelers, maybe it had something to do with U.S. troops. They've given all these kinds of conspiracy theories just to simply try and muddy the waters out there to get the focus off of Xi Jinping and the Communist Party.
It's not just about political retribution or accountability. It's important today. We need to know this so we can save lives going forward.
As America's death toll grows, at least half a dozen class action lawsuits have been filed targeting China, including the states of Mississippi and Missouri. Legal experts don't expect the cases to get very far because U.S. law generally prohibits lawsuits against other countries. Doerr believes global pressure and a major forum like the United Nations or upcoming G7 summit would be the best route. For that to work, he adds, the U.S. and Japan would have to take the lead because other countries may hesitate to speak out.
China really has a lot of governments under their thumb right now because they've loaned them an awful lot of money. They've built various infrastructure, roads, soccer stadiums in a lot of parts of the world. And those governments, even though there'll be pressure because of coronavirus, aren't going to turn upon those making the loans.
Regardless, Doerr sees China likely emerging unscathed and possibly stronger in the end.
Because of coronavirus, a lot of governments will likely have a big drop in funding, as we're seeing in the United States. They'll be unable to pay back China's loan. And so China could actually emerge from this really in a stronger position, believe it or not.
Meanwhile, officials say China's ruling Communist Party is becoming more aggressive, both outside the country and within its borders. The military is advancing in the South China Sea, prompting the dispatch of 2 American warships to the region. And China is reportedly spreading propaganda in the U.S. to control the coronavirus narrative. Back home, a tighter clampdown on Christianity not seen since the 1970s, an apparent effort to eliminate it from public life. Doerr says he doesn't believe China could have predicted an increase in its power because of the pandemic. He also says as the U.S. presidential election grows closer, he believes attention to the coronavirus will subside, which could also bode well for China. Eric Phillips, CBN News.
Thank you, Eric. China was a key topic in Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's brief visit to Israel Wednesday, where he spent less than 9 hours on the ground. But as Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, the visit dealt with some key political and international issues.
For Secretary Pompeo's first visit abroad since the COVID lockdown, his short time in Israel came with a loaded agenda. It included growing threats from both Iran and China, President Trump's Middle East peace plan, and, of course, the worldwide pandemic impact.
We'll certainly talk about the challenges the globe faces with COVID, Israeli technology, Israeli medical expertise, all of the things that you and I and our teams can work on together. I know we'll deliver good outcomes and decrease risk for people all across the world from this global pandemic.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave thanks and the reasons for how the U.S. is working to keep Israel safe from its #1 enemy.
First, by withdrawing from the dangerous Iran deal. Second, by taking head-on the masters of Iranian terror. Third, by going after continuing the arms embargo against Iran that has not stopped for a minute. Its aggressive designs and its aggressive actions against Americans, Israelis, and everyone else in the region.
Pompeo also met with blue and white leader Benny Gantz, slated to become prime minister in 18 months as part of the new unity government. Beyond Israel's domestic policies, Pompeo alluded to a major reason behind his visit, the growing threat of China.
They see Israel as a central place for technology, for dual-use equipment, and really tapping into the startup nation. So it's of deep concern to policymakers here in Washington.
Mark Dubovich says the U.S. is deeply concerned about agreements between Israel and China, especially a contract giving China control of the country's main port of Haifa for 25 years.
The U.S. Navy docks in Haifa, very close to the port that the Chinese are going to be running. And so obviously there's a security concern, there's a political concern.
Dubovich says Israel gets the message.
They've taken some significant steps in the right direction, including setting up an investment advisory committee, which will review future investments in order to not make the mistake they made with the China port. The security services in Israel are ensuring that the Chinese Communist Party does not use that for nefarious objectives or for intelligence penetration.
Pompeo's meeting came on the eve of two milestones: 72 years since President Truman recognized the State of Israel, and 2 years since President Trump moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Gordon, one headline I read simply summed up America's message to Israel, which is no more deals with China.
Well, it's a little late on that because they've already signed a deal for the port of Haifa, and that is one of the main calling ports for the U.S. Mediterranean fleet. So that dock is right next to the port of Haifa, so they've already given the contract for that port and the upgrades to the port to a Chinese company. And that's been the Chinese strategy for some time now. They're trying to literally get a monopoly on world ports, and they've been underbidding across the globe. And they come in with these deals where they will essentially finance it for the host nation. But at the end of the day, they control the operations of the port. So that's been a key part of their emerging strategy, and it's something we're all going to have to deal with for some time to come. I would say well into the next century, the rise of China.